My name is Ethan Walker, and this incident happened when I was 12 years old. At that time, my family and I had just moved to a quiet town called Blue Ridge, Georgia, not far from the famous Blue Ridge Parkway. My father, Michael Walker, had taken up a new job, and my mother, Laura Walker, wanted a peaceful place away from the noise of the city. The house we moved into was old, much older than the other houses around, but it was spacious, surrounded by tall pine trees, and strangely cheap for its size. From the very first day, the house felt off. It wasn't something you could explain easily. The walls looked normal, the rooms were clean, and the sunlight came in through the windows just fine. But there was a constant coldness inside the house, even during warm afternoons. At night, the silence felt heavier than usual, as if the house itself was listening. A few days after moving in, I started noticing small, unsettling things. Sometimes, while playing in my room, I would hear soft footsteps in the hallway outside. When I opened the door, no one was there. My parents brushed it off, saying old houses make strange sounds. I tried to believe them, but deep down, I felt watched. One evening, while my mother was unpacking boxes in the living room, the hallway light suddenly flickered and turned off on its own. She laughed nervously and blamed faulty wiring. But when my father checked the switches, everything was perfectly fine. That night was the first time I saw her. I woke up around 2:30 a.m. feeling thirsty. As I stepped out of my room, I noticed a faint blue-white glow coming from the large window at the end of the hallway. At first, I thought it was moonlight, but when I moved closer, my heart began to pound. Standing outside, near the edge of the road that led towards the Blue Ridge Parkway, was a young girl. She looked about my age. She was wearing an old-fashioned white dress, the kind you'd expect to see in photographs from decades ago. Her hair was long, dark, and unnaturally still, even though a cold wind was blowing outside. She wasn't moving, just standing there, staring straight at the house, at me. I froze. My body refused to move, and a strange pressure filled my chest. Her face was pale, almost glowing, and her eyes were hollow, yet somehow focused. Slowly, she raised her hand and pointed toward the road. I screamed and ran back into my room, slamming the door shut. My parents rushed in, worried and confused. When they looked outside, the road was completely empty. No girl, no footprints, nothing. They told me it was a nightmare, but I knew it wasn't. Because from that night on, every time the fog rolled in from the mountains, I felt the same presence, standing, waiting, calling me back to the road. And that was only the beginning. After that night, life in the house near Blue Ridge Parkway was never normal again. At first, my parents tried their best to keep things calm. They avoided talking about what I had seen and convinced themselves that I was still adjusting to the new place. But the house didn't let us forget. The fog was the first sign. Almost every evening, thick fog would roll down from the mountains and settle around our street. It wasn't ordinary mist. It was heavy, cold, and silent. The pine trees disappeared into it, and even the street lights seemed weaker, as if the fog was swallowing their glow. That's when I started seeing her again. Sometimes, while sitting by the living room window, I would notice a motionless figure standing near the road. The girl in the white dress never came closer. She never spoke. She just stood there, staring at the house, waiting. Each time I blinked or looked away for even a second, she would vanish. I stopped sleeping properly. Every night I woke up between 2 and 3 a.m., the same time again and again. The air in my room felt icy, and my breath became visible as if it were winter inside. From somewhere in the house, I could hear a soft humming, like a lullaby being sung in a broken voice. One night, I followed the sound. Barefoot, trembling, I stepped into the hallway. The humming grew louder near the front door. The door was slightly open, even though my father always locked it before bed. Cold fog began seeping inside, crawling across the floor like living smoke. And there she was, standing just outside the doorway. This time I could see her face clearly. Her eyes were no longer hollow, they were dark and wet, as if filled with tears that never fell. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Slowly, she raised her hand and pointed toward the road, again, towards the curve that led into the forest. I felt an overwhelming urge to step outside. My legs moved on their own, as if something else had taken control, but just as my foot touched the cold wooden porch, a loud voice broke the silence. "Ethan!" My father grabbed me and pulled me back inside. The door slammed shut and the humming stopped instantly. When he looked outside, the fog was still there, but the girl was gone. That night, my parents finally believed something was wrong. From then on, strange things escalated quickly. Doors slammed on their own. The television turned on at night, showing nothing but static. Scratching sounds came from inside the walls, as if nails were dragging across wood. The worst part? I began dreaming of the road. In my dreams, I was walking alone through the fog, following the girl deeper into the forest. And every time I asked her who she was, she would turn around and whisper the same chilling words. "You were supposed to see me." When I woke up, my feet were always muddy, and the front door was always unlocked. By the third week, our house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a trap. My parents stopped inviting guests over. My mother, Laura, barely slept and spent hours staring out the windows as if she was afraid to turn her back on something. My father, Michael, began researching the history of the area, convinced there had to be an explanation for what was happening to us. That explanation came from an unexpected place. One afternoon, while returning from school, I noticed an old man sitting near a small gas station not far from the Blue Ridge Parkway. He was thin, his clothes worn out, and his eyes followed me in a way that made my stomach tighten. As I passed him, he suddenly spoke. "You live in the White House by the forest, don't you?" he asked. My heart skipped. I nodded slowly. His face grew serious. "Then you've seen the girl." He introduced himself as Harold Bennett, a local who had lived in the town his entire life. According to him, decades ago, there was a tragic accident on the curved road near our house. A school bus lost control during heavy fog and crashed into the ravine. Several children died. But one story stood out. A young girl named Emily Carter survived the crash, at least at first. Disoriented and injured, she wandered onto the road trying to find help. Because of the thick fog, passing drivers never saw her. By morning, she was gone. Her body was never found. That night, my father searched old newspaper archives online. There it was, an article from 1989, yellowed with age, mentioning the accident and a missing child. Emily's photo made my blood run cold. It was her, the same pale face, the same long dark hair, the same hollow, pleading eyes. From that moment on, her presence changed. The girl no longer stayed outside. She appeared inside the house, standing at the end of hallways, reflected in mirrors, sitting silently on the stairs. Whenever I tried to speak to her, the temperature dropped and the lights flickered violently. She began showing me things. In flashes and dreams, I saw the crash, the fog, the twisted metal, Emily stumbling through the trees, bleeding, calling for help that never came. I felt her fear, her loneliness, her anger. One night, she finally spoke aloud. "It didn't die," she whispered, standing beside my bed. "I was forgotten." Her touch burned like ice. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. She wanted something. My father decided we had to leave the house, but when he contacted a realtor, no one answered. Our phones glitched, calls dropped, and the internet shut off whenever we discussed moving. It was as if the house and Emily refused to let us go, because now that she'd been seen, She wasn't done with us yet. By the time we reached the 4th week, the house near Blue Ridge Parkway no longer pretended to be normal. Whatever was tied to that place had grown stronger, and it had chosen me. It started with the mirrors. Every reflective surface in the house began showing things that weren't there. In the bathroom mirror, I saw Emily standing behind me, her white dress stained with dirt and dark patches that looked like dried blood. When I turned around, the bathroom was empty. In the hallway mirror, her reflection lagged behind mine, smiling when I wasn't. My mother was the next to change. Laura began acting distant, withdrawn. She complained of headaches and whispered that she could hear a child crying at night. Once I found her standing in the kitchen at 3 a.m., staring at the sink filled with muddy water. When I asked her what she was doing, she replied in a flat, unfamiliar voice, "She's cold. She needs to be washed." That was the moment my father realized this was no longer just haunting, it was invasion. Emily began visiting me every night. She sat at the edge of my bed, humming that same broken lullaby. Her face shifted constantly. Sometimes she looked like a frightened child, sometimes like something twisted by rage and abandonment. Emily told me the house was the last place she remembered warmth. "She brought me here," Emily whispered one night, pointing toward my mother's room. "She hears me." The activity exploded after that. Doors slammed so hard the frames cracked. The temperature dropped suddenly, frosting the windows from the inside. The power went out completely, plunging the house into darkness. From the walls came pounding, dozens of small hands striking wood, desperate to be let out. And then Emily tried to take me. One night, I woke up standing at the front door, barefoot, my hand already on the handle. Fog seeped through the cracks, curling around my ankles. Outside, Emily stood closer than ever before. Her face was no longer gentle. "Come with me," she said. "I don't want to be alone anymore." Behind me, I heard my mother crying, laughing, praying all at once. My father tackled me just as I stepped forward. The door slammed shut by itself, throwing him across the room. Emily screamed, not like a child, but like something ancient and furious. The house shook violently, pictures falling, glass shattering. That night, my father contacted a local priest and a spiritual researcher recommended by Harold. They warned him that Emily's spirit wasn't evil, but it was broken, fueled by neglect and rage. If she wasn't acknowledged properly, she would attach herself permanently to the house or to me. As they prepared a cleansing ritual, Emily appeared one last time before dawn. She stood in the hallway, her dress soaked, her eyes empty. "If you leave," she said softly, "I disappear forever." And for the first time, I realized the truth. Emily wasn't haunting us to scare us. She was haunting us because she was terrified of being forgotten again. The ritual began just before sunrise. The priest and the spiritual researcher arrived while the fog still clung to the ground, thick and unmoving. They warned us not to leave the house during the cleansing. Emily's presence was strongest at dawn. Candles were placed in every room, and the air filled with the smell of incense and burning sage. My father held my hand so tightly it hurt, afraid I might slip away again. Emily appeared almost immediately. She stood at the top of the staircase, watching silently. Her face shifted between a frightened child and something hollow, drained of warmth. As the prayers grew louder, the temperature dropped sharply. Frost crawled along the walls. The house groaned like it was alive and in pain. "You promised not to forget me," Emily whispered, her voice echoing from every corner at once. The researcher spoke her name out loud, reading from the old newspaper records, acknowledging her death, her suffering, her abandonment. The moment her name was spoken, the house shook violently, windows rattled, candles went out one by one. Emily screamed, not in anger, but in grief. Images flooded my mind, the crash, the fog, the twisted metal. Emily stumbling through the trees, bleeding, calling for help that never came. I felt her fear, her loneliness, her anger. My mother screamed too, clutching her head as if something was being pulled from inside her. Then, suddenly, silence. The fog outside began to lift. Emily stood in front of me one last time. She looked peaceful, just a child again. Her dress was clean. Her eyes were no longer hollow. "Thank you for seeing me," she said softly. She turned toward the road, took a few steps, and faded into the morning light. The house felt empty after that. Not quiet, empty, like something essential had left. We moved out within a week. Life slowly returned to normal. My mother recovered. My father never spoke about the house again. We told ourselves it was over, but some things don't end. Years later, as an adult, I was driving alone through Blue Ridge Parkway on a foggy evening. The road curved sharply ahead, just like in my dreams. I slowed down, and then I saw her. A young girl standing near the edge of the road, wearing a white dress, staring directly at my car. For a moment, I looked back, and she looked exactly like Emily. I slammed the brakes, but when I looked again, the road was empty. No footprints, no sound, just fog. And that's when I understood the truth. Emily wasn't tied to the house, she was tied to the road. And sometimes, when the fog is thick enough, she's still waiting for someone to see her.